Have you ever held a dollar bill in your hand and felt its weight? Not the physical weight of the paper or the ink, but the emotional weight of it. For most of us, money feels like something we are trying to accumulate, something we are afraid to lose, or something that is constantly slipping through our fingers no matter how hard we try to grab onto it. We treat money as a static object, a number on a screen, a pile of cash in a drawer. But what if I told you that money is not an object at all? What if money is actually energy? And more specifically, what if money is the most misunderstood form of energy flow in human history? When we shift our perspective from seeing money as a thing to seeing it as a force, everything changes about how we relate to our finances, how we make decisions, and ultimately how we experience life itself. Think about electricity for a moment. Electricity doesn't sit still inside a wire unless there is a circuit, unless there is a flow. If you have a battery sitting on a shelf with no connection, it has potential energy, but it isn't doing anything. It isn't lighting up a bulb or powering a motor. The value of electricity only exists when it is moving from point A to point B. Money works exactly the same way. Money has zero intrinsic value until it moves. A dollar bill in your pocket is just paper with ink on it. That piece of paper becomes valuable only when you hand it over to someone else in exchange for goods, services, or experiences. The moment that transaction happens, energy has transferred from one person to another. If money stops moving, if it sits stagnant in a bank account and never circulates back into the economy, it loses its vitality. It becomes dead weight. This is why hoarding wealth often feels so heavy, psychologically. You are creating resistance against the natural flow of life. We live in a culture that glorifies accumulation. We see people building empires of assets, stacking up gold bars, buying real estate just to hold on to it, treating money like a trophy rather than a tool. But trophies don't pay your bills. Trophies don't feed your family. Trophies are static objects meant for display. Money is dynamic energy meant for exchange. When we stop viewing money as energy and start viewing it as currency of value, the fear associated with spending begins to dissolve. Why do we feel guilty when we buy a nice dinner? We feel like we are wasting something precious. But in reality, you are paying for an experience. You are exchanging energy for nourishment and connection. That is not waste. That is circulation. Let me take you back to my own life before I adopted this perspective. I was working very hard, grinding through the days, trying to save every penny possible because I believed that safety lay in having more stored away. I had a high income, but I felt perpetually anxious about the future. I would check my bank account balance multiple times a day. I would feel relief when I saw a number go up and panic when it dipped. That is not financial security. That is addiction to the dopamine hit of accumulation. It was a cycle of scarcity disguised as prudence. I realized that no matter how much I saved, the anxiety never went away because my relationship with money was based on fear, not flow. I needed to break the circuit, so I started experimenting with what it means to treat money like energy. The first step was changing my language. Instead of saying I am saving money, I began thinking about preserving potential. Instead of saying I spent money, I thought about investing in experiences. When I bought a new pair of shoes, I didn't think about the cost. I thought about how they would help me walk with confidence and express myself. That shift in focus changed the emotional charge of the transaction. It stopped being a loss and started being an investment in my own energy field. But it goes deeper than just positive thinking. There is a physical reality to this flow. When you hold on to money too tightly, you create friction. Friction generates heat, but it also slows down movement. In physics, we know that energy dissipates when there is resistance. The same applies to your finances. If you are constantly worried about where the next dollar will come from, you are creating a mental blockage that prevents new opportunities from entering your life. You become so focused on protecting what you have that you miss out on what could be created. Abundance requires openness. It requires channels through which energy can pass freely. This is why giving away money feels so liberating to many people who practice this philosophy. When you give, you are clearing space in your own system for new energy to enter. You are acknowledging that there is enough for everyone and that the universe is not a zero-sum game where someone else has to lose for you to win. That mindset shift alone can alter your financial trajectory because it changes how you take risks. When you operate from scarcity, you play safe. You avoid investments, you avoid starting businesses, you avoid creative projects because they might fail and cost you money. But when you operate from the understanding that money is energy that needs to move, failure becomes just a redirection of flow. A failed business isn't a loss. It is data that tells you where the energy was misaligned so you can adjust your course. Consider the concept of debt through this lens. Debt is often viewed as evil or something to be avoided at all costs. But from an energy perspective, debt is simply borrowed potential. It is energy that has been lent to you with the expectation of return. The problem arises when we treat debt like a burden rather than a tool for leverage. If you use debt to buy things that depreciate immediately, like a car or luxury goods, you are creating friction and resistance. You are borrowing energy to pay off interest while consuming resources that lose value. That is inefficient flow. However, if you use debt to acquire assets that generate income over time, you are essentially using borrowed energy to accelerate your own growth curve. The key distinction is intention. Are you borrowing energy to create more energy later? Or are you borrowing energy just to consume it now? Many people struggle with the idea of spending money on themselves because they feel unworthy or afraid that they don't deserve abundance. This is a spiritual blockage, not a financial one. If you believe you do not deserve good things, your subconscious will find ways to sabotage your efforts to acquire them. You might lose jobs unexpectedly, have equipment break down, or make poor investment choices out of fear. These are manifestations of internal resistance. Adopting the money as energy perspective helps you recognize these patterns as energetic leaks rather than bad luck. When you see a leak, you fix it. You stop blaming external circumstances and start looking at your own relationship with value. There is also the aspect of time. Money is often called liquid assets because it can be converted into other forms quickly. But time is the most valuable currency we have. If you spend all day working for money that you then spend on things that drain your energy, you are trading your life force for temporary comfort. That is a poor exchange rate. When you view money as energy, you start to evaluate transactions based on how they affect your overall vitality. Does this purchase make me feel more alive? Does this investment allow me to create something meaningful? If the answer is no, then it doesn't matter if the item was cheap or expensive. It matters whether it aligned with your flow state. I want to talk about the collective impact of this shift as well. We cannot solve economic problems individually without addressing the systemic mindset that drives them. The current global economy operates on a model of infinite growth on a finite planet, which is mathematically impossible. This creates stress and instability everywhere. When we start viewing money as energy rather than resource extraction, we begin to see sustainability differently. Energy must be recycled in nature. It cannot just disappear. Waste is simply energy that has not been properly utilized yet. In our financial lives, waste is often seen as profit margins or tax write-offs. But if we viewed every dollar spent as a contribution to the ecosystem of value creation, we would make different choices. We would support local businesses because they keep the energy circulating within our community rather than sending it out to corporate headquarters thousands of miles away. We would buy fair trade products not just for ethical reasons but because supporting honest labor ensures that the energy exchange is equitable and respectful. This brings us to the idea of abundance as a state of being, rather than a destination. Most people think they need to reach a certain net worth before they can feel rich. They think once they hit 7 figures, then they will be happy. But happiness does not come from accumulation. It comes from flow. A river is never full in the sense that it stops moving. It is always flowing. If you try to dam a river and hold all the water back, eventually the pressure builds up until something breaks. That is what happens when we hoard wealth without allowing it to circulate through our lives. We become stressed, isolated, and disconnected from the joy of creation. So how do you practically adopt this perspective? Start by paying attention to your emotions around money. When you receive a paycheck, Notice if you feel relief or fear. Relief suggests you are still operating from scarcity, thinking that you needed more security. Fear suggests anxiety about losing what you have. Neither is conducive to flow. Try to cultivate gratitude for the energy entering your life. Thank the universe for providing resources so you can create value in return. Then, when you spend money, do it with intention. Don't buy out of boredom or impulse. Buy out of inspiration. If you are inspired to paint a picture, buy the paints. If you are inspired to travel and learn about another culture, book the flight. These are investments in your own energy field that will compound over time. Another practical step is to reduce friction in your financial life. Automate your savings so you don't have to make active decisions every month. Set up automatic transfers to charity or investment accounts so the money moves without requiring your conscious attention. This frees up mental bandwidth for creative work and decision-making. When you are constantly worrying about bills, you cannot think clearly. You cannot innovate. Innovation requires a relaxed mind, not a stressed one. By streamlining your financial management, you allow yourself to focus on what truly matters, creating value in the world. It is also important to understand that money is neutral. It does not judge you. It simply responds to how you treat it. If you treat it with fear and greed, it will behave chaotically. If you treat it with respect and clarity, it becomes a powerful ally. Think of money as a mirror. It reflects your internal state back at you. If you are chaotic inside, your finances will be chaotic outside. If you are organized and peaceful, your finances will reflect that order. This is why financial coaching often involves deep psychological work. You cannot fix the numbers without fixing the mindset behind them. Let me share a story about a friend of mine who went through bankruptcy. He lost everything he owned. His house was foreclosed on, his car was repossessed, and he had no savings left. Most people would have spiraled into depression or anger at the system. But instead, he embraced the energy perspective. He realized that he still had his skills, his health, and his ability to create value. He viewed the loss not as a defeat, but as a reset of his energy field. He started small, taking odd jobs, selling things online, and reinvesting every dollar back into tools that helped him grow. Within 2 years, he was earning more than before because he had stripped away all the unnecessary baggage and friction. He learned to live with less so he could focus on creating more. His experience taught him that money is not about having. It is about doing. It is about what you can accomplish with the resources available to you at any given moment. This lesson applies to everyone regardless of income level. A person making minimum wage can have a flow state if they are passionate about their work and treat every dollar as sacred energy. A billionaire can be miserable if they view their wealth as a burden or a source of insecurity. The amount in the bank account is irrelevant compared to how you relate to it. The question is not how much money do you have. The question is how well are you allowing energy to flow through your life? Are you blocking the path with fear, guilt, or shame? Or are you opening wide gates for abundance to enter and exit freely? We also need to talk about the concept of legacy. When we think about leaving money behind for our children or grandchildren, we often think in terms of inheritance laws and tax planning. But from an energy perspective, true legacy is not what you leave behind. It is how you lived while you were here. Did you create value? Did you help others move forward? Did you contribute to the collective well-being? Money left behind that sits in a trust fund for generations can become stagnant again unless there are mechanisms in place to keep it moving. But even more importantly, your example of living with purpose is far more valuable than any check written on a piece of paper. Children learn how to handle money by watching their parents spend and give, not just by inheriting assets. If you show them that spending is an act of love and giving is an act of generosity, they will carry those values forward into their own financial lives. There is also the spiritual dimension we cannot ignore. Many ancient traditions view wealth as a test of character rather than a reward for hard work alone. Hard work without wisdom leads to burnout. Wisdom without action leads to stagnation. The combination creates flow. Money tests whether you are aligned with your purpose. If you are working in a job that drains your soul, No amount of salary will compensate for the lack of energy renewal. You need to find work that resonates with your values so that every hour spent earning money feels like an act of creation rather than drudgery. When you love what you do, time flies and money seems to follow naturally because you are operating from a place of joy rather than obligation. I want to conclude by reminding you that this shift is not just about financial management. It is about liberation. It is about freeing yourself from the tyranny of scarcity thinking that has dominated human history for thousands of years. We were taught to fear poverty, but we rarely teach people how to cultivate abundance within themselves. Abundance starts internally before it manifests externally. You cannot attract what you do not believe in. If you believe money is hard to come by, you will always struggle to get more. If you believe money is energy that flows freely when you align with your purpose, you will find new ways to access resources and create opportunities. So the next time you hold a credit card or swipe a phone screen to make a purchase, pause for a second. Feel the energy moving through your hand. Acknowledge that this transaction is part of a larger web of exchange that connects you to everyone else in society. Thank the people who made the goods available and thank yourself for choosing wisely. Then let go of the attachment to the outcome. Trust that if you stay true to your values and keep your energy flowing, the right resources will appear at the right time. Money is not a problem to be solved. It is a partner in your journey toward fulfillment. Treat it with respect, move it with intention, and watch how it transforms not just your bank account, but your entire life experience. Remember that you are the conduit through which this energy passes. You are not the owner of the money. You are the channel for its use. When you realize this, the pressure to control everything disappears. You can relax into the flow. You can take risks because you know that even if things don't go perfectly, the energy will find a new path. Life is dynamic and unpredictable, but so is money. Embrace the uncertainty rather than fighting it with rigid plans and hoarding behaviors. Let yourself be surprised by how much there is enough of when you stop trying to grab onto every single piece. In closing, I invite you to experiment with this perspective for just 1 week. Notice your thoughts about money without judgment. When a negative thought arises, acknowledge it and gently shift it toward gratitude or flow. Spend $1 on something that brings you pure joy without any expectation of return. Give away $5 to someone who needs help without expecting anything in return. Observe how these small actions ripple outward into your life. You might find that the fear diminishes and a sense of lightness takes its place. That is the feeling of energy moving freely through a clear channel. That is what abundance feels like. It is not a number on a screen. It is a state of being where you feel connected, supported, and capable of creating value in whatever form comes your way. Money is energy, and you are the source that directs its flow toward good ends. If you found this video helpful or informative, a like and a sub would be highly appreciated. And thank you for watching.